Hey, what's going on? It's Mav. We're gonna have a conversation about why it's so important for you to really believe whatever you want to believe. Now, we're born into this world, and oftentimes we have people who will tell us that we need to believe certain things. And that was definitely the reality for me. Um, the thing is, like, when we're really little, we need guidance. We need people to tell us, like, okay, this is what this is. Like, like when you drive down the road and you're like, Mom, like, why is that cow so big on the pasture? They're like, that's not a cow. Or wait, this story is going a little bit differently than I wanted it to. But basically what I'm saying is, like, okay, what I meant to say is, if you were driving down the road and you're like, Mom, why is that dog eating in the pasture, right? And then your mom would say, that's not a dog, that's a cow. It's important for us to have direction in life, for us to ask questions, and for people to help us understand what's true and what's not true. The thing is that sometimes when it comes to, I guess, beliefs in terms of like how the world works, and then when we get into like religion and all that kind of stuff, things might get a little bit more complicated, because they don't just tell you what to believe, or they don't just guide you. Oftentimes there is some forcefulness in terms of making you believe certain things. The biggest problem with this is when certain people are told what to believe and told that it's wrong for them to believe otherwise, or they're forced to believe something. So like, especially when it comes to, like I talked about with religious beliefs, like for me, I was raised fundamentalist Christian. There was no room for me to believe anything else. There wasn't any room for doubt. There wasn't any room for questions. You weren't really allowed to be curious about other things. There was no room for experimentation. Anything that was outside of our sect of faith was seen as evil and bad. I could go into lots of detail about all the different types of things that happened while I was being indoctrinated. But that probably could be an entire video in and of itself. So I won't do that right now. But basically, these things have like pretty significant implications on folks. For me, it kind of led to the fear of the unknown, and being, I think, really nervous of all the different possibilities in the world. And at the same time, it really creates this like us versus them philosophy. It tells us that people who believe differently than us are to be like, we're kind of supposed to be afraid of them, or we're not supposed to kind of trust them or listen to them because they believe differently. And yeah, this is how dangerous these beliefs can be, especially when we start to do the thing where we think that our beliefs are better than other people's beliefs. That is where things can get really messed up. I understand that sometimes people have beliefs that can be harmful to others, right? And I know that it's uncomfortable when that happens. The truth is that everyone is allowed to have whatever beliefs that they have, even if they're harmful. And that's an uncomfortable thing to sit with, but it's just the reality. So what do we do? What do we do when we're left with these beliefs that we don't necessarily feel comfortable with? That's really what I want to talk about. We start to feel kind of frustrated when we're starting to kind of try to navigate these beliefs and try to see like how other people relate with us in terms of religion and in terms of beliefs. I remember having one person, I was running this group conversation about like spirituality, and someone who, I don't know if they were a Christian, but they believed in Jesus. They were just talking about faith and religion, and they asked like, don't people who don't believe in Jesus, aren't they missing something? right? Because if you grew up in the Christian faith, you're really taught to believe that Jesus plus nothing is everything, and Jesus plus anything else is meaningless, right? It's just, we just have, like, Jesus is kind of the missing link to everything. So if you have been raised in that and you believe that, you will think that someone who doesn't believe in Jesus is missing a fundamental part of life. And my response to them was, well, now if there was someone on the other side of the world than you who had a different belief, and they heard that you believed in Jesus, they might think that you are missing something, right? Because she came from the assumption that her belief was the correct belief. And then someone, like I said, the person on the other side of the world is coming from the position that their belief is the correct belief. So then, who is right? That is the main question. And my answer to that question is, it doesn't matter who's right. It's all about what feels right for you, what feels right for the individual person. So I guess what I really want to get to in this conversation is how to start healing, how to move past being indoctrinated, right? This is a difficult thing to do, especially if you were born inside of a faith and it was kind of rigid, especially. It might feel pretty tricky to learn how to move out of that. Now, the first thing that you must do is ask yourself this question. Is there anything about my belief system that doesn't sit well with me? That question again is there anything about my belief system that doesn't sit well with me? Now, there can be tons of different areas, and I'll just list a couple of different ones. Number one, are there scandals in your specific faith practice? In conversations with other people, scandals and things like that can be a major reason why people in a certain faith might move out of that faith, especially because we have, a lot of times it's religious leaders who are getting caught in kind of messy situations, and that leads to quite a bit of doubt. So instead of kind of ignoring the doubt that has arisen because of those things, I'm just, I guess, asking you to look at that a little bit closer and to acknowledge that those emotions of doubt, right? And I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. The other thing is gender roles. Is there anything about your faith practice and the way that they view gender that doesn't sit well with you? Maybe your belief is a very patriarchal system, so there is kind of a uplifting of I'm going to use some gendered words here, but uplifting of like men and males and that idea, and females and everything, or pretty much anything that's not men, not cis men, is kind of squashed and put on a lower pedestal. So we also want to consider perhaps there's just too much distinction between gender roles. Like in your specific faith, they might separate the two too much, and it might feel a little bit uncomfortable for you. Specifically for me, okay, this is one that's important for me as a non-binary person. And if you might be someone who is gender expansive, walking into a belief where everything is very binary might feel very uncomfortable for you. So just ask yourself if that feels okay, or if there's something going on there, or if that doesn't sit right with you. The other one is human rights. What does the faith that you practice prioritize human rights? The human rights also that are really meaningful and important for you specifically. And this can be with anything. This can be with like trans rights, medical access to hormones, different things like that, abortion rights, if that's an area of importance to you, housing, adoption. There's tons of different areas in terms of like social justice, and housing. Like there's so many other areas that I'm obviously not listing right now, but check to see if there are any, I guess, beliefs, structural beliefs in your religion that aren't aligned with your human rights views. The other thing is openness. Like, is there openness in your practice? Do you feel freedom to choose to expand your beliefs in one area or another? Or is there a preference toward rigidity and following rules? What I will say here is that some people do function better when they have structure and rules in terms of their religious practice. If that is something that feels great for you, that's incredible. Please continue to do that. If that feels restrictive, narrowing, suffocating for you in any way, that's a sign that you might want to do a little bit more exploring. So after you've asked yourself that question, you've kind of gone through these different areas, and maybe you decide that you want to explore a little bit more, your next step is to start researching and asking questions. I think the first thing to do is to start asking questions to people who are around you. And one issue with this is that many faith practices, especially rigid ones, don't have a lot of patience for these questions. You might not feel satisfied by a lot of the answers that you're getting. If that's the case, then that's when you need to step out of your specific religious faith and start doing research. For me, this was looked down upon. If my parent, like when I was living with my parents, if they knew that I was researching other faiths, they would have had a problem with it. So it wasn't something that I did at all when I was living with them. I had to kind of wait until I was in a safe environment to start exploring a little bit more. But if you feel like this is something that you're ready for, you're ready to start exploring a little bit more, please start doing research. What you really need to do is rip your faith to shreds. That is the most important thing to do. You need to start, like what, I'm being really serious right now. If you need to do research, that means that you need to go and start from like where your faith practice began. So for me, I was looking at like the roots of Christianity, very early Christian thought. I was following the path of the religion, and I saw how there were, different sects that started to kind of split off. People started to have conversations. The Bible had to be pretty much woven together into the book that we have today that we call the Bible. There were books that were chosen to be kept in there. There were books that were chosen to be taken out. And I needed to find the answers and say, why were they taken out? Why were some kept in? Why were there certain things that weren't being shared with the general public? And I had to find those answers out on my own. No one was going to sit down with me and tell me those things. I had to do that research. And like I said, I started kind of deconstructing my entire faith. I started pulling at the threads and figuring out what was left, right? By the way, I was left with nothing. There was nothing left for me after I started pulling the strings away. And after I did the research, I had a lot more education and awareness. Then that was a good moment for me to say, like, I'm not very happy with what I have left here. It does not bring me joy anymore. This is not fulfilling for me anymore. So that it was time for me to move on. For you, after you do this research, you might feel more deeply connected with your faith. You might feel a sense of empowerment and excitement to continue to practice what feels right for you. Perhaps there is a cultural connection to your faith practice, or maybe a cultural faith practice that you haven't engaged in very seriously. And after you start to do research, you find out that this is something that is very important for you, that you want to continue on. I can mention very briefly that I'm a Haitian American, so my family comes from Haiti, and I know that my great-grandparents were converted by missionaries in Haiti, so they used to practice Haitian voodoo. And so a part of my healing was exploring Haitian voodoo a little bit more, because that was a foundational practice that my ancestors practiced. So looking into it a little bit more was very meaningful to me. It didn't end up being like the only practice that I had chosen to, or the only path that I'm going on now, but voodoo has influenced my faith, influenced the practice that I have right now, which I guess I can talk about at the very end of this, but okay, yeah. let me move on. So the other thing is, as you're going through this process, don't be surprised if there are some pretty intense emotions that come up for you. So whenever these do start arising, the important thing is to allow yourself to feel. I will tell you that deconstructing my faith was actually earth-shattering for me. Especially when with Christianity, it's so interwoven with the way that you literally view how the world works, how literally everything about what you believe. Excuse me. So as I started deconstructing my faith, it was like the rug, it was like the earth opened underneath me, and I just like was free falling. It was miserable, not gonna lie. It was a very, very hard experience to kind of realize that I had almost felt like bamboozled or tricked my entire life. So I had tons of resentment that came up for me. I had emotions of guilt and shame because of the beliefs that I had held for so long. I felt embarrassed about how I had promoted these beliefs, and I had promoted hateful beliefs to other people. I was a person who would have looked at a person like me today and said that like I was going to hell, right? So I had to grapple with the fact that I had been that person, and learn and just let myself feel those feelings and kind of let that move through me. Some other emotions that might come up for you might be feelings of anger, right? Frustration. I kind of also mentioned shame before. And if any of these come up as you are deconstructing your faith, that's totally normal. Just allow yourself to experience those emotions and be gentle and kind to yourself as you do. Feeling the emotions as they are is a very, very healing action that you can do to yourself. So definitely do that more. And then after that, after you felt what you needed to feel, the last tip I have for you is to explore. Start to experiment and start to play around with different faith practices, different belief systems, no faith practices, no belief systems, whatever feels most authentic to you, what feels most aligned and meaningful to you in your heart. I want you to stick with that. I think that, and I know my wife definitely has similar beliefs. You talked about this before, that oftentimes when you don't have a faith label, especially in a Christian society that we live in, you're kind of seen as a weird person. I think that sometimes you're more respected if you have a different faith practice than if you like don't have a practice or don't have a faith at all. And that's just kind of the bias that we live in, especially in America. I'm not sure what it's like for you in the country that you live in, but I'd be really curious if you want to let me know in the comments what that's like for you. But because right now, like I said, I'll tell you a little bit about what I believe right now. I am walking the pathless path right now. I don't really have a specific religion, a specific faith, a specific anything that I follow. I just kind of believe that there is a larger energy around us. I'm a very spiritual person, a very like woo-woo out there kind of person in the way that I think, but it's not grounded in any tradition that I found specifically. I do really enjoy kind of like I talked about voodoo before, so I do enjoy kind of witchcraft, like I said, other spirituality. Buddhism is a kind of an important faith practice that I've drawn a lot of benefit from, and there actually is still some aspects of Christianity that are still meaningful to me, even though I do not consider myself a Christian by any means. And by the way, being able to say that was a very difficult thing for a really long time. So I'm just very excited that I can do that, because I was a Christian for the majority of my life. I've only not been a Christian for a little over a year and a half or something like that. And I've been, like I said, I've been studying religion, studying faith my entire life. I went to Bible school for a really long time just to study God. And it's something that's really important to me. But it is really important for me to just do what feels right in the moment. I'm just learning how to feel good in my body, to do practices that energize me, to do practices that are meaningful to me, practices that are healing for me. And that's what I want for you as well. Not for you to just do something that you think is right, that other people are telling you is right. No, like go out there and experiment for yourself. And actually, this is the most important point. It's all about your experiences. So don't believe something if you haven't experienced it for yourself. Like, wait until you actually experience it, then you can make a better decision for yourself. Yeah, there's so much more that I could say about this, but I will leave it at that for right now. I really enjoyed having this conversation with y'all, so thank you for sticking around. If you do want to join folks who are working on like emotional healing, figuring this stuff out, you can join our Facebook group. I'm going to leave a comment or just, I'll leave I'll leave the information below so that you can find it. You can come on over and join us and have some conversation about where you're at in your process. If you are deconstructing your faith, if you're curious about other faith practices, if you've been interested in experimenting, it's a really great place to do that. You have a lot of other folks who have done this work already before, and who are kind of thriving in this ambiguous space. This is why I talk about this like it's non-binary spirituality. It's not either this or that. It's both and it's nothing at the same time. That's the way that I really have been enjoying like living my life. Thank you for showing up here. Thank you for showing up for yourself. Peace and love. I will see you next time.